Boa noite a todos, pessoal. Sejam bem-vindos a mais uma sessão comentada do XVII Fantaspoa. O Fantaspoa 2021 conta com o patrocínio da Lei Aldir Blanc, a Lei 14.017. Ok? O Fantaspoa 2021 conta com o da Lei 14.017 de 2020 e para essa sessão do Sangre Comigo, nós teremos a
'Is everyone frozen? Only one person's frozen for me.
Yeah, same here.
Okay.
Let's wait just a minute, but I don't know if João will be able to return.
I hope so.
Because he needs to present this. So
Yeah, he's giving you the, oh, okay.
Yeah.
let's start between us. And
Sounds good.
If he returns, he will stop us to present this. But it's a pleasure to talk with the director and the stars of Bleed With Me. And I will start asking a question to Amelia, but you girls feel free to interrupt and to speak, to answer anytime. I read an interview with you, Amelia, where you explain about, you said that at the beginning of the project, you intended Lauren's character to be more traditional vampire or something like that. It's true?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very, very early on, not even a script stage, just kind of like conceptually. But I think I just realized that if it was going to be more overtly a vampire movie, there's a lot of those kind of films. And I didn't really know what I was bringing to the table that was new necessarily. So I kind of tried to move away from that idea. But that's obviously a little bit where the kind of blood consumption and bloodletting ideas came from. But I moved away from the kind of straightforward vampire thing pretty early on.
Mm-hmm. And in the end, this kind of a vampire with the syringe and all, it was a reference to George Romero's Martin, or just a coincidence?
No, it's a coincidence. Several people have told me I should watch that film. I guess it was maybe more, obviously she didn't use a syringe, but Elizabeth Bathory kind of figure, I guess, was more of an inspiration, definitely with the shower scene. Because I was trying to think of like, okay, what could be a different version of that if she bathed in blood, you know? So yeah, no, I haven't seen Martin, but I should.
Oh.
Everyone's been recommending.
But lots of people asked you about it, for sure.
Yeah, several, yeah.
Okay, did the idea of leaving the things open at the ending existed from the beginning, or was it created during production?
No, I kind of went back and forth with was it really happening or not. And then in the script was like relatively ambiguous, and then the edit, we tried to kind of balance those things. And yeah, I just kind of wanted it to be up for interpretation because the film is very grounded in Rowan's perspective, and she never really knows. Like she's always like not certain about what's happening. So since it's told through her perspective, I wanted to kind of stick with that and let the audience kind of see things through her eyes. So what she's assuming is happening or not, kind of stay with her. So that kind of leaves it ambiguous, which I know is not for everyone. But that's what this particular film is.
Makes it more fun, though, in my opinion, to try and figure it out. So choose your own adventure story that way.
Yeah. The problem is probably people ask you about this all the time in interviews and Q&As, like, explain the ending, please, what's happening, or not?
No, I feel like people ask like, what was the intention with the ambiguity? But I feel like either you like that kind of thing and you have your own interpretation, or you kind of don't. But then maybe it's not the film for you, which is fine. So yeah, I think it's more. I think people more so ask like, is Emily a vampire? And I think we kind of already touched on that.
I read that you told Lauren to act like she asked you about I am a vampire or not, and she told her to act like, oh, you decide, you choose, or something like that. It was easier to work like this, or
Yeah, I mean, I think Lauren just asked, is Emily really doing something to Rowan's character? And I think for me, the ambiguity lies in not, is it really happening, but to what degree is it happening? So is it to the degree where Emily's a monster, or is there some sort of Munchausen by proxy? Is she still hurting her, but not in this kind of like vampiric degree? Yeah, I think it was during a rehearsal, and Lauren just kind of wanted to know kind of to what extent. And I guess because the film is so heavily tied to Rowan's perspective, as a director, I wanted to stick with that, and let Lauren kind of make her own choices. And I didn't really know, I think now I know, but at the time I didn't know what her choices were. To kind of, she's an enigma. So I feel like if she's an enigma to Rowan's character, she could be an enigma to me as a director as well.
Yeah, I think we've like talked about it so many times now that I think both of you kind of know like where my head was at with it. But I mean, I think I initially asked Amelia because I wanted to know, obviously, like how to play Emily. Like, should I play her as more of the villain, or should I play her as more innocent? But then I ended up just realizing like, the entire film is really rooted in Rowan's perspective. So I created my own backstory for my character, which was a lot of fun, and kind of intense. But, I had my own backstory for what she was doing, why she was doing what she was doing, and to what extent. But ultimately, I think I played this with keeping in mind how Rowan is seeing me from scene to scene. So really, I was kind of playing what I thought Rowan was seeing. For most of the scenes, yeah. Yeah.
But was it challenging for you to decide how much evil or not were you?
Maybe in a couple scenes, I guess, but I think I really just had to put myself in Rowan's head most of the time and think, okay, what does she think is happening right now, and play that character, because I know where the film ends up. Obviously I knew that Rowan's mind is going to some pretty crazy places. So it was kind of, it wasn't too challenging to play that, to play what I think she's seeing. But it was actually the scenes where it's kind of not from Rowan's perspective, where it's just like me and Brendan or something like that, where I was almost a bit more unsure, because I'm like, okay, so how is she really, like, what is she like in real life? Like, who is this? Like, how does she act when she's not in Rowan's brain? Yeah, it was interesting.
I think it's much more fun to
I
work.
asked Lee the same question.
Yeah, it's much more fun to work with a director who doesn't tell you what to do. I mean, I mean that with respect to all directors, but I think it also shows mutual respect when a director doesn't tell you exactly how they want it to be done. They kind of trust you to do your job as an actor and figure out how the heck to play that character. And it can be a conversation, and it's obviously collaboration with everyone on set, with your other actors, with the director. But I mean, if you're not bringing something to the table personally, then why did they hire you, right? So that's we think of more beautiful things collectively, I think, than individually. And that's the beauty of filmmaking, is it's so many people coming together to tell one story, and everyone has their kind of piece in it, and that makes it multifaceted and more interesting than it would be if it's just a script, right? Although it was a fun script to read too. It's a very different script than it is a film, in the sense that it's three-dimensional, it's in moving color, it has sound, and it's multisensory. So yeah, it's great. It's great to work that way. I'd much rather work that way. It's more fun.
Yeah.
it was a open process for something like that.
I mean, I think that the reason working with Amelia is so great is because she's always so open to like playing around or to like suggestions that we might have of, you know, the way that we would, you know, act in a certain scene or whatever. Like she very much has her vision, but she can very easily adapt and just like, you know, let it go and accept suggestions or whatever it might be. Like she doesn't have this ego that's like, no, it's like gotta be
you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, which is like, I mean, yeah, it's an amazing way to work because like Lee was saying, it's, you know, and she's treating you like an artist, you know, she's not treating you like just like a puzzle piece. So yeah.
Well, actors too, like as a director, you have to think of so many different facets of the film, but actors have to fully embody the character to a degree that I don't, right? So I think that a lot of times actors are going to have a better suggestion for something because they're inhabiting the role. And that's all they have to think about. It's a lot to think about. I'm not, but you know, it's like there's a specific focus there, whereas I'm thinking about a multitude of things. So I love that collaborative process.
Mm-hmm. So I checked the IMDb of Lauren and Lee, and I saw that you two, in addition to actresses, are also writers and directors of short films, right?
Yeah, well, I think Lee's a bit more of a director than I am, but yeah.
I'd say I'm more of a producer now. I think of myself as a filmmaker, producer / actor. That's kind of how that's my self-given title.
But
I
you
like
worked
directing
in the past in short films or
yeah. I've directed a couple things. I think it's so much fun, but I like embodying the character maybe a bit more than seeing the big picture when it comes to being on set. But as a producer, I like being in early, although I wasn't for this project, I came on later as a producer, but for other projects, I love kind of shaping the narrative and the story telling and then planning what the set is going to be like and what post is going to be like. Yeah, I like all of that. It's all fun.
So my question to you three is, it was difficult or easier to work between three people who wrote short films, direct short films before, and work in another films was easier to work this way?
I think so.
Yeah, like I never thought about it, but yeah, I guess yeah.
I think when you've done more than. Sorry, hon. You want to?
No, I was going to say that's probably part of the reason why it was so great to work together, because we've all kind of been a part of like different positions on set, and so we kind of have a more rounded idea or like view of working on a set.
And like an appreciation too. Like if I've worked with actors who've only ever been actors, and it's hard sometimes because they don't have a respect. Some of them do, but some of them don't have the same level of respect that one should have for every member of the crew. Like, you know, what is craft doing? What is the gaffer doing? Like, everyone is important. And if you haven't had any of those roles yourself, you're like, why is it taking so long? Why haven't they shot this already? Why am I just waiting around? Like, no, because everyone's really busy trying to make you look amazing and sound amazing. So they deserve our respect for that.
I remember at parts, Lee, you and I would be like, we felt so weird about like how much we were being sort of coddled because everyone else had it so much worse than we did.
I know.
Because it was freezing, and you know, all the conditions were very challenging, and you know, even though we had ultimately a great time, you know, it was a tough shoot, and we were, as actors, you know, getting so much attention, and do you want hot chocolate, and do you need a blanket? We're like, do you need hot chocolate? Do you need a blanket? Like,
like who's bringing you your chocolate pudding?
There's people outside like holding lights, and it was like -20, and you really got to hand it to those guys. They're amazing.
It was a huge crew or a small one?
No, very, very small.
Yeah.
Probably like 15 to 20 people. depending on the day. Yeah, because also the location was super small. So I don't know if we would have been able to fit any more people in that cabin. Because everything you see in the film is was the place, pretty much. So it was a small space.
But you guys stayed in the cabin or not?
I did, because budget reasons. Me, the sound recordist, and the DP stayed in the cabin. But then we had we rented kind of chalets nearby that were maybe like a 15-minute drive for the rest of the crew, because there's no space, and I by the end of it I was like, I'm ready to leave this place.
How did you choose the location, the cabin?
Yeah, I mean, we location scouted. I mean, I was naive in the sense that I was like, oh, a cabin in Quebec in Canada, that'll be super easy to find. And we scouted for a couple months. I think it's because I did want something pretty specific. And then the thing is too, was on something so micro budget, from a production design standpoint, you need somewhere that has a lot of stuff in it that you can use already. So we looked at some places where the art director was just we can't afford to fill this space, right? Whereas that place there was so much to use, and so it was more kind of a matter of curating stuff. And Stephanie Bourbano, who was the production designer, did a really great job at kind of just picking and choosing the best things that were in that space. And once we found it, we were like, okay, this is the place. But it was tough. We arrived on set and there was no running water because the well had frozen. It was a very, very cold winter, and it never unfroze the time we were there. So we had no running water there for 3 weeks shooting. And it was on top of this hill, and just it was kind of nearing the end of winter, late January, early February. So there was a lot of ice buildup and snow buildup, and Lauren had an injury at the time too, so that was difficult to get her up the hill to the location every day. So it was definitely isolated and challenging from a logistical standpoint, but it's great location. I think it really makes the film in a lot of ways.
Yeah, looks amazing, and suffer is temporary, but the movie is forever. Right?
There you go.
Exactly. Well said.
Better myself.
So, Amelia, apart from Martin, that we already told, can you talk more about some of your influences to make this picture?
Yeah, really early on, a film by the Duplass brothers called Baghead was an inspiration for writing the script, because that was obviously done. It was that kind of mumblecore thing where it's done super low budget, but then that film is mumblecore and a horror film kind of coming together. And there was some nice character dynamics, and I like how they just kind of spent time with the characters and then still kind of played with your expectations of things. So that film, The Invitation, ever since I saw that, when it first came out, I've just really loved that film, and the tension. Karin Kasuma, the director, who did Jennifer's Body and among other things, because that's also a film told from kind of a singular perspective, and is he imagining things? Is he overly paranoid? So playing with all that kind of stuff. And then Antichrist a bit as well, the Lars von Trier film, just for the kind of cabin in the woods stuff and the kind of claustrophobia and tension and stuff. So those were probably a few films that I drew from.
So being Bleed With Me, a type of a vampire story, and your new film, Bloodthirsty, right? Is a film about a werewolf. With and with live legend Michael Ironside in it. And Lauren
more of a cameo, but he's in a couple scenes.
It's a Canadian monument, right? Icon. So I'm curious if you intend to continue approaching old monsters with a new vision, or it was just a coincidence?
It was kind of a coincidence, though I do love kind of monstrous things and creature. I mean, actually, to some degree, I'm working on developing a film with Lee right now that has octopus monsters in it. So we're still continuing in the monster vein. But I think in terms of the similarities between those two projects, it was definitely just a coincidence, because I didn't write Bloodthirsty, and I just came on board quite last minute actually into the process. looking at like monster as extension of, you know, humanity and human. I think that's like super interesting, and the kind of body horror side of it as well, of this like transformation, which is less in Bleed With Me, obviously, but there's still the kind of like bodily stuff that's going on, and kind of I guess the focus is more the two women, whereas in Bloodthirsty it's very much like Grey's journey and her transformation.
Mm-hmm. And all of you love horror movies, or not?
I'm starting to love them more and more, and I think I owe that to Amelia.
Fuck yeah.
Just working on these last two films, it's really, it's gotten me to fall in love with the genre. I think I kind of used to see it in a specific lens, and but working with Amelia and seeing how she interprets horror and like her take on horror films, and hearing like her suggestions of films that have influenced her, and then like watching those films, I feel like I'm realizing there's a lot more to horror than I thought. And so I'm definitely falling more and more in love with it.
I'm in a really similar boat. I've always loved dark, dangerous, kind of, you know, twisted things. So horror does fit into that, but I have to admit that sometimes I get a little scared. And I find it hard to keep watching, but I've gotten a thicker skin since meeting Amelia and watching more horror to kind of get ready to work with her. And I also, I'm same as Lauren said. I've kind of had my eyes open to how wide the genre really is, and how there's more than one way to look at horror. I mean, I think Bleed With Me is a perfect example of that. Like, some people are like, is it a horror? Is it a psychological horror, or like what's going on? And I like that about horror, that it can still surprise people with what it means. So it's and as an actor, I think it's the funnest genre to work in, because like anything can happen.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And Amelia?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I like horror.
Imagine she was like, no, I hate it.
Yeah. I think, same thing. Like, there is a huge range of things, and I think sometimes people do have too narrow-minded a view of it. And there's lots of horror films that I don't really like, you know, like kind of things like Saw or whatever. Like, that's just not really for me. But there is such a wide variety of things, and to me, horror films don't have to be like scary either. Like, I like scary horror films, but that's not necessarily a defining thing. And I think that's why people are drawn to it as filmmakers as well, is because it is very malleable. And there's a lot of different ways to look at it, in so many subgenres and such a wide variety of things. And, you know, that's why I'm drawn to it.
Mm-hmm. So Lee said that it's funnier to work with, to act in horror. And I believe that it's funnier with practical effects, like in your film is almost all, I believe it's all practical, right?
Yeah. There's no VFX. We had
real
money
fake
for that.
blood, real fake blood in the face. It's better to direct and to work with this kind of practical effects, I believe. What do you girls think?
I mean, from my standpoint, 100%. I know that both Lee and Lauren have had their fair share of being covered in fake blood, so they might feel differently. But I think seeing it on the day, I really have very little experience with VFX and stuff, so maybe that's my apprehension about it as well, is just because of like lack of experience. But there's something so much more tangible about practical effects, and especially when you're dealing with stuff that, I don't know, they kind of become an aesthetic into themselves, where it's not really necessarily about showing like realism, but that they're just like an aesthetic choice within the film. But yeah, between doing Bleed With Me and Bloodthirsty, Lauren has definitely had some bloody days on set.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I love practical effects, and I've realized that through these two films. I mean, if I ever work in horror again, which I hope I do, I would love to keep doing practical effects, because I mean, I think obviously as an actor, like anything that's gonna just make the story feel more real is going to help your performance. So, I mean, especially on Bloodthirsty, when I was in full werewolf makeup, it really helps your performance to be able to just like look at yourself in a mirror and go like, holy shit, okay, that's what I look like. You know, and you use that in your performance. So yeah, it's really fun. I loved it.
Yeah, it's almost like you don't have to, like, it really makes the job easy.
Yeah.
Like
easier for sure. Yeah.
When you have sort of wounds or injuries on your body, the short film that Amelia and I met on, Undress Me, I had like this wound on my arm that I had to like peel the skin off. And I really believed like in the moment that it was my body that was having this happen to it. And yeah, it just makes the performance, it makes it easier to step away from the performance too mentally, because you can wipe off the makeup, you can take off the prosthetics. And in the moment you know too that you're delivering a performance that matches the visual, right? With special, like with VFX that are added later, you're acting and you're hoping that later they're going to add something that matches your performance, right? Or that you're giving them enough so that it looks good together. Yeah, it's fun to believe it when you see it. Yeah.
So Amelia, can I ask you about the rabbits in the film? Because there's rabbits in the bathroom, there's rabbits, bloody rabbits. Lauren is eating a rabbit in a hallucination. Can you explain the rabbits? Why rabbits?
Yeah, I mean, the wallpaper was actually just, I mean, it was a choice, but it wasn't intentional in the script or anything. Basically,
Coincidence.
I mean, coincidence is maybe not quite the right word, but like, the bathroom was actually shot in an apartment in Montreal because the cabin we shot at didn't have a bathroom that would work for shooting. And so then the production designer was kind of like, let's put some wallpaper to make it kind of match the aesthetic of the cabin. And she sent me a few options, and then one of them was this rabbit wallpaper. And she's like, I think we should go with this. And I was like, all right, let's do it. But it's people are always very drawn to it.
It's amazing.
They always ask what that. Yeah. Actually, I have a leftover piece here, actually. I wasn't planning to do that, but then I just looked up. Yeah, I mean, I think that the original thing was this scene that's in the film where they discover this kind of in the woods. And it just felt kind of like a disturbing image, but also something that like is kind of part of the landscape that like, obviously it's an extreme thing, but Rowan's character is still kind of taking it in as maybe something different than what it is. Like we're not quite sure. And yeah, so there's not kind of any like specific symbolism for me, just more like an extension of kind of just like the wilderness landscape and the way that Rowan is like twisting that in her mind, and everything is like heightened in her mind. And then the wallpaper was just a fun thing.
Yeah. It works because people start to try to find explanations and theories about it. So,
But rabbits show up a lot in horror. Maybe that's just like lately, because it was like in Us, there's rabbits. And then I saw a film called Violation recently, and there was also some rabbit imagery. I was like,
there's rabbits in Bloodthirsty.
There's rabbits in Bloodthirsty.
Yeah. They're everywhere.
There's something about rabbits. Yeah. So there's a lot. There's a new generation of women making horror pictures right now. I don't know if you guys have some names that you like, that maybe it's an inspiration for you. Some women making horror right now, because there's a lot of new names and making amazing pictures.
Yeah, I mean, she's not necessarily new to the business at all, but Karin Kasuma is a huge influence for me, and I think she just like everything she does is super interesting. I love Jennifer's Body. I saw that when it first came out in theaters as a teenager, and I was like, oh, this is a movie that's just like meant for me. And then obviously, I'm forgetting her name, but the woman who made the Babadook.
Jennifer Kent.
Jennifer Kent, yeah. I think that was like, you know, because I think the Babadook came out the same year as The Invitation, like 2016 or something. So that was like there was some interesting stuff coming out. Yeah, I would say mainly those two are the names that come to mind, kind of like straight off the bat. but yeah, it's like obviously a question I got a lot about kind of like women in horror. And I think actually there was like a tweet or something, or maybe it was just a quote from Karin Kasuma that's like, yeah, I always get asked like why women love horror films and like making horror. And it's just like, she's like, women deal with some of the darkest parts of humanity. Like, I don't know the exact quote, but it was just such a great answer, because it was just like, yeah, of course we would. Why wouldn't we be interested in this, considering just kind of like the way women navigate the world a lot of the time. So
constantly in fear. Sadly. Yeah.
And how about you, Ghost?
I would have to.
Do you have a favorite director?
I would have to say Amelia Moses.
She doesn't pay us to say that. We genuinely love her so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not like, I don't have a couple, I'm bad with details, so the names aren't running off the top of my head. I think, though, in general, there have been some female characters that in horror that I've really related to. The Netflix series that came out, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, called I Am Not Okay With This, really resonated with me. I watched it and I texted Amelia right away. I was like, have you seen this? Like, I feel like this will be up your alley. I loved her as a character. I obviously, I don't know. I think there are a lot of female role models in film, and I look at horror, but I also look beyond. Like I'm really more interested in women in general, telling stories that resonate with them, whether that's through the lens of horror or in any other genre.
Yeah, I would completely agree with Lee. But I think if I had to mention like one horror film that really has stayed with me and that I somehow like find inspiration from is Rosemary's Baby. I think her performance in that film was just outstanding, and I always kind of I think it's because I was told when I was younger that I looked like her, and so there's like a few Halloweens in a row where I dressed up as her, and like I've watched that movie countless times. It's just kind of like a weird little inspiration for me, but that's probably my favorite one. But again, like with directors, it's typically just trying to champion female creators in all genres and support them. So Amelia Moses, I mean, literally is just my favorite horror director. So
I'll e-trans you some money later too.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, it is great that Lauren brings Rosemary's Baby to the discussion, because my last question is a difficult one and is about it. Because there are some people that said that female directors are more sensitive to dealing with certain themes, like, for example, maternity. I don't know, especially in horror cinema. Maybe a woman filmmaker is more sensitive to deal with some certain themes. But then we have Rosemary's Baby, that is from a guy directing Polanski. We have Stephen King's Carrie, for example, that is another story about a girl. What do you think about this thing? There's some certain themes that only a woman filmmaker can approach, or do you think that this depends on the sensitivity of the filmmaker, independent of the sex of the filmmaker? Yeah,
I mean, I think that obviously, to some extent, anyone, despite some specific kind of maybe like cultural things, most people can approach a subject matter. Like, I wouldn't say like you can't, obviously, but I guess like the kind of place where I've noticed like really, you don't always feel that it's a female director, but the place that I have more so in certain films lately have been rape revenge films. Like the film MFA, I saw that at Fantasia, and the director was there, and it was very much like, I can tell that a woman directed this film, and I don't usually watch it with those thoughts, and I don't usually think about those things. But that was definitely a film where like it was very obvious.
That French movie, Revenge.
Yeah, is that a female director? I actually don't know.
Yeah.
It is, okay. Well, there's an interesting subversion at the end of that film too, where like he's completely naked, and you're just kind of like, oh, this is imagery that we haven't seen before. In that kind of, it's a subgenre that I think that women using that subgenre is like a super powerful and interesting thing. That would be the one that kind of stands out. And Violation too, co-directed by a woman. You just feel it. There's something about that subject matter that I think it does make a big difference. But I would never say, you know, can or cannot, but just like that's a place where I think that women are going to have a very specific perspective and things to say, you know, within that subgenre specifically. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of on set, it's, you can only really know yourself and how you act on set. I feel like I hear things about maybe more women on set creates maybe a more welcoming environment at times. But again, that's just kind of from my experience or through my peers or through what I've heard, you know.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, just in general, that we obviously need more female points of view in mainstream media. And just, you know, championing stories from not just the male perspective, from like all perspectives, whether that's, you know, like gender identities, sexualities, etc. And yeah, just like female input, I think is so valuable, whether it's, you know, pre-production to even like finishing touches in post. I think that like female voices really can deepen characters and like create more distinct voices. So anything we can do to like champion female creators. I mean, really that just starts with hiring more women. So, but yeah, that's where it starts, I guess. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think storytelling is about having empathy, and there are some men, many men with a lot of empathy, and there are many women with a lot of empathy, and those are the people who are going to make the best storytellers, regardless of whether they're trans, cis, gay, straight. It's having the ability to imagine what it's like to be somebody else. And so there's some, you know, there's great men who've told the stories of women, and there are great women who will tell and have told the stories of men. I think what's more important is that having diversity on the set, behind the scenes, in front of the camera, means that we're going to tell stories that resonate more widely and that are like specific, but also more universal in a way that we haven't seen. We're starting to see, but you know, historically we didn't get to see those stories. And yeah, I think it's more interesting when more people are invited to the party.
Okay, there's a last question. João is asking about what are you working on right now?
Who wants to go?
Lee and I are
working. The weird part.
Working together on another project with a writer in Toronto right now. That's about it for me.
We've got a short coming out that's going to be premiere. I can't announce it officially, but I've got a premiere coming up in a couple months for a short film I produced. Horror inspired, actually.
Very cool.
And then there's Bloodthirsty, which you should all watch.
Yeah, Bloodthirsty is coming to a streaming site. I don't know. I think it's just Canada and the States, right, Amelia? On the 23rd?
Yeah. That's the just release for now.
Yeah, so that's the first release for that. So that's very exciting. Next week, couple weeks. Yeah, I have a short film that I wrote and am producing that we're launching a crowdfunding campaign for soon. So shooting that this summer. Hopefully it'll be out next year. Just about queer friendship and the value of platonic intimacy in queer friend groups. And then working on a feature mockumentary as well with my roommate, who's also a filmmaker. So, yeah.
Somebody is asking where can I watch the movie, but I'm not sure what movie because there's lots of movies being. So I don't know.
Well, Bleed With Me will be available sometime later this year, but I don't think it'll be available in South America. But
watch at Fantaspoa.
Yeah, there you go. And hopefully one day it will be available beyond Fantaspoa in South America. And same with Bloodthirsty. Like it's coming out in a couple weeks, but just in the US and Canada. So I'm not sure what the plans are for the rest of the world. But hopefully soon.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time. Congratulations for about the movie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And let's see your next movies soon, I believe.
All right, I'll get started now.
We'll be in touch.
Guys. Just kidding, guys. The guys. Bummer. Just kidding, guys.
All right.
Okay.
Never mind. He doesn't want to see them.
It's like I changed my mind.
So thanks a lot.
Thanks for having
Thank you.
us. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Do we leave? Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Bye.
we leave.
I think we leave.